Hey, girl.
All right. Oh, my video's off again, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Such a speaker. But I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Rock in it. All right, how'd that go? I feel like that went well.
I do. Do you think it went well?
Yeah, I think it went great. I'm trying, and on my recording, what I'm trying to do is put you in the speaker, like when you're speaking, so I'm small, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
pull this back down so it just keeps moving. It helps with this, squirrel people out there with no, yeah. And
Yep.
I switched to water, so now I can. That's how the no. This is my wardrobe change.
Yes.
All right, let's see here. So we're going to talk about in this next group what to look for in a trauma therapist generally and for EMDR and how do we
Mhm.
find one. Okay. All right. I will start us off.
All right.
So I don't know what part this is going to be, but because I'm thinking we'll probably break the first into two, maybe intro and talking about stuff and then the red flags. So this will maybe be part three.
Okay.
Let's see here. Um, Part three. I'm just making notes. Give
Yeah.
me just a second.
Totally fine.
Part two is red flags. And then part three will be this. Okay, that helps me when I'm doing the intros too. All right. I am so excited to be here again with Ciji Wagner talking about what, oh, I just jacked that up. Pardon me.
It's okay.
It's like trying to do like podcast recordings with somebody else
Yeah.
and like you have to be like, all right, I'll get it. Ciji Wagner of Louder Than Silence. I am so glad to have you back and that we are talking about all the different things that we've talked about so far about having and finding safe communities, the red flags of communities when they are not safe. And now we're going to really talk a little bit more about CG, how do you find a trauma therapist, whether like a general one or for EMDR? Like,
Mhm.
what are you looking for in that? If you are somebody who's like, I know what my next step needs to be, it's probably maybe I need to go out and find a therapist. I need some help. How do you do that? What do you do? What are your suggestions for that?
Yes. What a great question. As it turns out, this is another question that I'm often asked. And so, yeah, so again, like this is for people looking to address their trauma, right? So not necessarily just for kind of any general therapy. So we want to make sure that we are looking for therapists who are used to and trained in working with people with PTSD or complex PTSD, right? So for, those of us who have like long-term, abuses, long-term traumas, that we want to make sure people understand kind of the depth of what that means when they're interacting with their clients. And you can find a general counselor, right, that isn't necessarily trained in these things, but why not, right? Like if we're looking for healthcare, we want to make sure we're going to the right type of healthcare. And I also recommend looking at folks who use multiple modalities. So that means like multiple different types of therapies. And this is kind of from the perspective, again, thinking of it as healthcare, we want to make sure if there's like multiple ways to address the problem, then we have those available. So for instance, like EMDR, we'll be chatting about that in a second. Internal family systems called IFS, or CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's lots of different types of modalities to help people as they're dealing with these issues. And so making sure that people have their own toolbox to be able to help us build our toolboxes.
And those are the words like I think that's really helpful because when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like, I just need a trauma therapist, and I had no
Right.
idea. I got lucky that I had my therapist, Tara, and she was EMDR. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And,
Yes.
like I was so clueless. I just like accidentally slipped into her.
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. She does the CBT too, and a bunch of other things. So these are the words I feel like sometimes I just needed the words and what does it sound like and what does it look like and
Yes.
what am I looking for behind the name and stuff. I think it's just really, really smart.
Yes, exactly. One of the recommendations as well that I ask, and I recommend for people to ask their therapist or potential therapist is if the therapist goes to therapy themselves. Um, most people who get into mental health care, or social work do so because of some of their own stuff. So not everybody, but we want to make sure that the people that we are tasking with helping us with our mental health, do they believe enough in mental health care to participate themselves?
I think that is such a smart question to ask. That's so smart. I never
I
even
well,
thought about it.
well, so it hadn't occurred to me until I found the therapist that I did EMDR with, and she was talking about like having talked to her therapist one day about whatever, and I was just like, oh, right. And then I was like, right, because, and I said this out loud, I'm like, because most therapists have their own trauma. And she's like, oh, she's like, well, not everybody. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not saying right, but like,
Yeah.
just the like, yeah, of course, like it's people who have experienced this that want to help others through it, right? And so
And it's not a sign
we,
of weakness if somebody is going to get therapy, whether it is your own therapist, whether it is your boss, whether it is your
right,
pastor, whether it is whoever. I feel like that's a sign of, you know what, I'm going to be the best iteration I can be so I
yeah,
can help others, right?
right,
Yeah, that's
right.
so good. I love it. Okay, keep going.
Um, yes. And so another thing to look through, to kind of look through, like when you're visiting websites or chatting with a potential therapist, is familiarity and working with additional considerations. So, for instance, if you are looking to address spiritual abuse from your background, like do they have expertise in that area? If you are coming from like an abusive, like childhood family dynamic, do they have experience in that area? And so there's lots of different specialties, right? And so just kind of knowing, oh, right. So besides dealing with, the sexual violence, I also see this is a big piece of what I'm working on, and this is a big piece. So like, let's make sure that this therapist can actually address all these pieces.
Even understanding the identity issues that,
Right.
for anybody who's been facing or who has faced trauma, just to know that somebody can be like, oh yeah, I'm cool with that. Like, that's fine. You're
Mhm.
struggling with gender, you're struggling with sexuality, you're struggling with
Right.
with race, you're struggling with, whatever that looks like, you're struggling with faith. Like, can your therapist handle that? Because a lot of times, and I never realized this myself until I've had people of color who are my girlfriends going, I I can't talk about my experience with a
Right.
Caucasian counselor. They don't understand it. They minimize and they just don't get it. And I thought, oh yeah, wow,
Mhm.
I never even, that never occurred to me. Or if somebody's really struggling with gender or sexuality, for somebody to like, you're walking into the therapist and they're hammering your face and going, no, no, you have to be, that's not helping the person get to where they maybe need to go.
Right.
Uh, that's just a whole
Yes.
aside for me. Sorry.
Yes. No, I mean, no need to apologize because that's, yeah, I think people need to hear that, right? That if there's something that a person is wanting to address and has been a struggle for them, why are we shaming people for having struggles? Right? We all have struggles. And if somebody is willing to say, I will stand here and look my struggle in the eye, wonderful. Like, let's just make sure that we have the resources to do that.
100%. Awesome,
Yeah.
Ciji. Thank you.
Um, and part of that, actually, what you had mentioned touches on the next thought, which is that we need to know our own biases and triggers, right? That if we, I use the example of like, if the therapist is, a former clergy person, and we were harmed by a clergy person, maybe that's not going to feel like a safe space.
Totally.
Right. And so it like, and that's fine. Like, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person or that you're a bad person. It's just I recognize where I'm coming from. And this is not something that will promote health to the fullest for me.
That's wise. So
Yeah.
wise. Agree. Wow. Good.
And then just like logistical considerations. I think we like are so often in the like esoteric, right? Like trying to figure out these like really
Give
big
us the practical, CG. Bring us down.
yes. So like we do need practical, right? Like, do we want to meet online versus in person? Like, some people will only do online and some people will only do in person, and just know that, right? Like, know whatever is the right fit for you. And if going in person, how far away it is. And like, if street parking really stresses you out and you live in a place where there's only going to be street parking, you are less likely to go to the appointment if you know you're going to have to find street parking, right? Like, just
Are
like
you are you
taking
looking at me? I
away,
live in Chicago. Do you understand
right?
this? Come on now.
Yes. I mean, I lived in DC for many years. Like, street parking is like,
For
it's
those of
not,
you in Boston.
yes, exactly, exactly. But I think that if we're thinking about this from like, let's take away as many barriers as possible. What does that look like logistically, right? Like, if we're talking about connecting with a therapist and all of that, wonderful. But logistically, if I know street parking is going to be a hindrance or whatever it is, right? Then like, let's not create an extra hindrance to me showing up fully present. And even just thinking about what will stress you out. Like, if you have to go on a certain highway to get there, and you know that there's a lot of traffic on that certain highway most of the time, are you going to spend the first 10 minutes of every session trying to come back down from the stress? Or like, are we promoting just being able to be fully present for the full time that we're there? So,
So
yes.
wise. I actually literally drive an hour to
Yes.
my therapy session still.
Yes.
And I drive about 45 minutes back because, rush hour traffic in Chicago.
Right.
And for me, that is my time of like, just breathe. This is
Yeah.
my time to pray. But if that doesn't work for you, then don't do it. If that's going to be
Right.
like, I am going to like lose my ish once I get there, that this is not helpful. Set
Right.
yourself up for the win.
Yes.
Set
Exactly.
yourself up for
Yes.
the win. Make it as easy to go to, make it as happy for your little heart. If
Yeah.
and I know that there are people that the online just is not going to work for them.
Right.
And that's fine. Know
Right.
what you need to
Yes.
best help yourself.
Yes.
Such wise. Again, this is wisdom teaching here.
Yes. And I think, just being okay with knowing within ourselves, right? That like you're describing it's like driving an hour for your appointment. I mean, for me, that would just stress me out so much. Like, there would be nothing enjoyable about that experience, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong for you, right? And like, it's totally 100% fine that you're like, yes, this is great. And for me to be like, hard pass, there's no way. No way.
I love that.
And
We're
and
all so
like, isn't
different.
that wonderful that we all get to like understand ourselves enough to know what it looks like to make a good decision for ourselves?
And
Like,
it's nice to make your own choice.
yes.
I think that's my takeaway in this little second right here. We get to make our own choices.
Yes.
We get to call our shots, whatever that looks like. And
Yes.
one size does not fit all, which
Exactly.
goes back to the safe groups and how to, the red flags. I love this. This is, oh, you're my girl.
Um, and then for EMDR specifically, and for those of you listening who maybe are not familiar with EMDR, it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a mouthful, which is why we say EMDR. But it's a specific type of trauma therapy, and it's what Louder Than Silence promotes. It's what we pay for our clients. And it really helps address these like long-term PTSD responses. And it's wonderful. And I can talk at length about it. But if you are in that step or you're looking for EMDR, so sorry. We want to make sure to seek out somebody who is certified at least a level 2. So there's different levels of certification, and level 1 is more for like a one-time instance. For like, you get into a car accident, right? That's a traumatic event. We address the traumatic event. we can move on. But we want to make sure that we are seeking out somebody who understands the long-term implications of extended trauma. And so level 2 does that. And it's ideal if you can find somebody who is EMDRIA certified. So EMDRIA is the EMDR International Association. And so that's like additional training beyond the standard certification, right? And
Excellent.
so
And are you talking about like a licensed social worker? Is that, what are we looking for maybe in the letters after the names?
yep.
Do they have to be doctors, PhDs? Do they have, like, what do you need? I'm just curious. This is
Yeah.
something I'd like to know.
So you do not need to like have PhD or doctor. They can be, right, like you can like have a doctor and also be EMDR certified. But you'll find that with like LPCs, so it's a licensed professional counselor, or an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker. So both of those classifications will be people who are trained in therapy counseling with people. And so then if they have those degrees, then the EMDR would be like an additional certification on top of that. And so like you're not getting like an EMDR degree, you're getting a counseling therapy degree and then this additional certification.
That's really helpful and a good
Yeah.
clarification. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on looking for a therapist, looking for an EMDR therapist. Again, I feel like a lot of these conversations could go on for much longer, but that's kind of the quick version. So hopefully that helps kind of help people point themselves in the right direction.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's really empowering to give people the words, the ideas, the things to look for, because
mhm,
uh, let's just talk about it. It's really hard to go and find a therapist. It's
mhm,
so overwhelming. I've had so many people reach out after the podcast and with the book and go, who did you go to? And I'm like, um, she's a wait list now because I've sent so many people to her, of
right.
course. But it's like, but what do I look for? And I'm like, someone really good and somebody who recommended. I don't know. I'm like, what is there like a website that they should go to, or do you Google something like this, CG? Do you recommend that, or what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so for EMDR specifically, I'll answer that piece first. So EMDRIA, so again, EMDRIA, has a website you can find all of the certified EMDR therapists in whatever location you're in, right? And so there's also additional ways to search. So you can say that you're looking for somebody who is Spanish speaking, certified in EMDR, or whatever it is. So again, that is for EMDR specifically, but that is a good kind of first step. The way I found my therapist was that I Googled EMDR and then the neighborhood that I'm in, and then just kind of sifted through the like, oh, this person works with these additional considerations.
Yeah, that's
And then once
really,
I
yeah.
saw that on like one site, then I was like, oh, right, I need to make sure that this is covered with whoever I find.
Mm.
But I do find that that's often helpful to be able to kind of quickly and easily like check out a few sites, because that is the fastest resource really that we have available to us
Yeah. And
right
it's
now.
funny because the way I found my therapist
Yeah,
after Michelle, my friend who is a psychotherapist for years said, you might want to get some therapy. I was like, nah, I'm good. And she's like, no, you really probably might want to get some trauma therapy because you have a lot of these symptoms that are obvious to those of us who know. And so I literally went to a girlfriend I was in a literary group with, and I knew Dr. Mary Miller, and I'm like, we can't do this together, but can you, I know that's
yeah,
what you do. Could you recommend somebody for me?
mhm,
I'm looking for this. And she was
yeah,
like, call this person. And these are the two I would say, hot
right,
on. We'll slay it for you. So I got recommendations, but I was also I was in a fairly small city of only like 60,000, and everybody knew everybody. And
right.
and then that's a whole nother consideration. Everybody knows
It is,
everybody, which is a
yes,
whole weird kind of thing. But anyway,
yes,
ah, that
um,
is
yes.
super. Okay, what else you got for us? Anything else on how to figure out a trauma therapist? What if you don't mesh with your trauma therapist at the beginning? Is there any shame? Like, how long do you give it? Do I like? What if I meet? Am I committed if I go in? And I'm like, this is not going to work. How long do
Yeah.
you commit?
What a great question. So therapists generally will offer a free 30-minute consultation, usually over the phone. And that's a great time to just get a general sense, right, of who they are. So you're not necessarily walking into your first therapy session with your first interaction with them. You have a little bit of background. But I think that this goes back to the idea of listen to yourself. Like listen to, like, do you feel at peace? And I know that that might feel a little complicated because we're talking about very challenging and difficult things. And there's a difference between saying, oh, I feel this stirring up within me. And so that's kind of interfering with peace versus the like, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I don't feel comfortable. Like there's a different sense. So like, can we navigate this space of, oh, I feel discomfort. The discomfort isn't coming from the interaction. The discomfort is facing the painful and
That
separating
is
that.
so important.
Yes.
And there are so many layers to that too,
Mhm.
because we're just trying to figure out, is our radar right?
Right.
And yeah, I would have never, ever, ever gone to my current therapist because he's male,
Right.
except that he called me on the phone and we did the 30-minute consult. And I'm
Yes.
like, dude, I need you to you better, here we go. And I like laid it out for him to scare him off.
Yeah.
And when he didn't run, I was like, we'll see
Cool.
how he does in the first session. I'm like, you got to be able to do this, 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 and this. And this is really what I'm looking for. And I'm going to let you know, here's my background. And I've already been through this. So, and by the way, I have this on call. So
Mhm.
just so, I mean, and then I literally said, I want to be your first appointment of the day
Yes.
because here's the thing. I need you fresh.
Yep.
I'm showing up. I'm showing up at 175% every time because, CJ, you know me, right?
Yes.
I'm showing up intense.
Yes.
I'm ready. We're going to
Yes.
cannonball into healing. And
Yeah.
I need you to be able to handle that, right?
Yes.
Why are you
Yes.
laughing? Does that seem funny to you?
Um, it's as though you're describing me.
I knew it. We must all be similar.
Yes.
Like, all right,
Yes.
we got an hour. We're gonna get through at least
Yes.
10 years of healing here.
Yep.
Yeah, no.
Oh, we have an hour. Okay. Well, let's fit 4 hours of work into an hour.
How fast can we
And
talk? How fast? I
yes.
can get it. Just like, yeah,
Yep.
I know. And he's like, there was one point I'm like, we're 4 weeks in. Am I good? Can we go now? Like, I'm done,
Yes.
right? And he's like,
Yes.
oh yeah. And I'm like, I know. It's just me. So okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Good.
But I think that one other piece that that kind of like touches on for me is knowing for yourself going into this, what is the goal for your going to therapy, right? Like EMDR is a set protocol, right? So theoretically, the goal would be to complete this protocol. But if you're going to talk therapy and not going through this specific protocol, to what end? Are you saying, oh, well, I'll go 4 times and I'll expect to be fixed? Or are you saying, I am planning on going for 6 months? Like, is it, connected to a time frame? Or is it connected to, I want to feel this way about this piece of my life, and then I'll say I'm taking a break? Or, so it's knowing what the goal is so you can communicate to the therapist, right? Like you going in and saying, well, I've already done these things and I want to work on this. And I mean, you're setting expectations, you're setting
Right.
goals, and knowing how to communicate those pieces. You don't have to communicate it perfectly, and it doesn't have to be like, here's 10 different points, but just being able to say, here's what I want to get out of this.
Yeah, I think that's super wise. And one really interesting resource that my friend Michelle Novotny gave me was is she showed me that I don't know if you can see that, everybody. It's
Mhm.
called Therapy Journal, and it is a guided something. Here it is, a guided reflection space for therapy sessions, and it's literally made by therapists. And
Yes.
every week you can walk in and it's like, okay, what are your goals for this week? How are you feeling? Here's your
Mhm.
check-in. This is what's going on. This is how this is going to, this is how is your day going from day to day in between the sessions. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, baby, here's some writing prompts. Here's some other stuff. And it was like, oh, and here's your session reflection. Cause sometimes I just don't remember what the heck we even talked about
Right.
I mean, I'm just like, again, I'm just trying to get dinner on the table.
Mhm.
Like, can we
Yep.
get me healed so I can be a better wife and a better mom? Like, I just want to get through. But this has been actually, this is funny. When I wrote the book, I basically, when I wrote the book, I basically did this on my computer after every single session and everything in between. And so that's actually, it's funny. I'm like, oh yeah, that looks really familiar. I wish I would have had that one when I started this whole thing out. Thanks a
Exactly.
lot,
Yeah.
Michelle. Not thanks.
Yes. Um, yeah, I think, these are some good kind of like pieces of framework for, people to kind of know, all right, generally, I have an idea now what this process looks like. And so we're never going to 100% know until we go through it, but there are people who've gone through it, right? And so finding enough information to feel empowered without having so much information that we feel frozen.
So true, which is every trauma survivor's issue that a lot of people who haven't endured trauma just might not understand as well. Again, I'm going to just put this up there. It is Therapy Journals, and I do not get paid for this. This is just something that I found that I was like, what? And I thought it was just really a great way for somebody else. If you just needed some help, how do you start? How do you get it going? I thought that those would be really, really helpful. And your tips are phenomenal. Like as always, CG, you've thought this well out in advance. And I really appreciate that. Because where were you when I started all this stuff? I needed you.
I was sorting through all my own stuff. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this part of our multi-part series on finding our safe circles and what is the one thing that you need to do to help you heal spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, to do it just today. So thanks everybody. We'll be back on the next session.
Thank you.
For the love of Peter, my husband like literally walked in and started talking. I'm like, I told you I was recording here. Like, hey, how you doing? So I don't know if you heard that, but there we go.
No, I couldn't hear anything.
Oh,
So.
hallelujah, Jesus. All right. Let me see here. Do you want to, let me see here. Talking about accountability community that I want to get to your 3 steps actually, because
Okay.
I have to be on another Zoom at 1.
So do I. Yeah.
So let's do the 3 steps.
Okay.
And so this is what is this part? Part 3. This is going to be part 4.
Should we like exit again and restart just to make sure that we don't get cut off?
Touche. Yes. Yes,
Okay.
because you're smart. Yes. I see you back here in a second.
Okay.